Tonight on Whether or Not, we'll take you around the country and even into outer space as we tell you about the latest in earth science news. You'll see where Penn Staters have been researching this summer. They're from the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences. And we'll show you how one weather observer has been defying the odds with 8 decades of observations. All that, and Ryan Belz will be here with this week's feature story as Whether or Not starts right now. Well, thank you for joining us. I'm Brad Guay.
And I'm Christy Reuille.
Well, so Christy, the American Meteorological Society summer community meeting is in town this week.
That's right, and that means a lot of big names in the meteorology world are going to be in town as well. And Brad, I know you've been involved in the planning of this meeting. Can you give us kind of a hint of what's going to be going on this week?
Yeah, there's a lot of great sessions with some of the most prominent people in the weather enterprise, including Joel Myers, founder and CEO of AccuWeather. There's also Louis Uccellini, who is the director of the National Weather Service. They're both going to be speaking.
And how long is the conference going to last?
Conference is going on from Monday morning until Wednesday night, so it's going to be a busy, action-packed 3 days right here on campus as we see a lot of people coming through town. Our own Dr. John Neese will be hosting a panel regarding the availability of weather information through social media, and that's going to be attended by Ginger Z, who is actually the weather host on Good Morning America.
Well, that definitely sounds like there's going to be a lot going on this week, and here at Whether or Not, we will definitely have a recap of the meeting for you on a later episode coming up after the meeting. But for now, we'll turn it over to Nature in the News.
Well, when you think of Kansas, whitewater rafting probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind. However, a new man-made whitewater center could change that. Kansas tourism officials met with leaders of North Carolina's National Whitewater Center last week to discuss a potential $50 million whitewater development at the state's Clinton Lake State Park. That state park is located about half an hour outside of Topeka, and officials say that adding a whitewater facility would be a big tourism boost to the state, which isn't particularly known as a vacation destination. In addition to rafting, the proposed development would also feature zip lines, hiking trails, and canoeing and kayaking.
Bad news for anyone who found the media's overuse of polar vortex and derecho akin to fingernails on a chalkboard. The Associated Press has just given reporters the green light to use them. Earlier this month, the AP released their updated 2014 style book, which is considered the gold standard for grammar, punctuation, and writing etiquette for journalists. The style book tells journalists how to properly use terms like flash mob and tweet. And this new update has added a few weather terms, including polar vortex, derecho, monsoon, and storm surge to the style book. It is because of the AP style book that capitalizing tropical storm when it becomes part of a storm's name, like Tropical Storm Bertha, has become the norm and why there's always an E in tornadoes, at least when it comes to journalism. Thankfully, though, despite a few requests from a few folks on Twitter, the AP did not add Sharknado to the style book.
Well, after 10 years and millions of miles, Europe's unmanned Rosetta probe has arrived at its destination, a comet orbiting somewhere between Mars and Jupiter. Over the next several months, Rosetta will orbit the comet, which measures just a few kilometers across, observing it as it shoots on its path towards the sun. In November, the Europeans will attempt an unprecedented feat. They'll try to drop a lander onto the comet. What could go wrong? Named Philae, the lander will observe the comet as it moves closer to the sun. The comet will develop its tail of dust and gas over the next few months, thanks to the heat of the approaching sun. Now, the lander will analyze these processes, marking the first time that a comet has ever been observed this closely. Ryan Belz joins us now with this week's feature story.
Earlier this summer, I did a story where we learned that most sporting events take place outside. Take football, for instance. And when it rains, well, they continue to play. The National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, NASCAR, is another example of an outdoor sporting event. However, when it rains during a NASCAR weekend, they have to make sure the racetrack is dry before they can continue to race. From the 2.5-mile superspeedway in Daytona Beach, Florida, where afternoon showers and thunderstorms are almost a given, to the 2.45-mile road course in Watkins Glen, New York, where the Finger Lakes can provide for an increased chance of precipitation when the weather is favorable. Throughout the years, NASCAR has utilized technology to help with the process of drying their racetracks. Whether it is the jet dryers, which were introduced in 1972, or the Air Titan 2.0, which was introduced in early 2014. So we know how NASCAR dries their racetracks after rain has moved through, but how does NASCAR ensure the teams, spectators, and track personnel are kept safe in the event of severe weather during a NASCAR weekend? This past weekend, NASCAR trucked north to Watkins Glen, New York for the Cheez-It 355 at the Glen. According to the National Weather Service in Binghamton, New York, one of the things they do outside of the office is on-site support for events that draw large amounts of people. Locally, this can include something like the State Fair, as well as the NASCAR race at Watkins Glen. A couple of the National Weather Service's meteorologists are at what is called an Emergency Operations Center in Watkins Glen. Catherine Hawley and David Morford were members of the staff who participated this year. The Operations Center is set up for the NASCAR race weekend. The staff is here providing weather reports to local, state, and federal agencies. This allows the emergency officials to run the race smoothly and safely. While weather can impact the event itself, such as the race in this case, weather can also impact other aspects of the weekend. The weather forecast for this past weekend at Watkins Glen was spectacular.
Ryan, you are bringing just a beautiful forecast for race weekend.
I am. It's like Mother Nature knows that NASCAR is in town because guess what? Sunny skies today, sunny skies tomorrow, and guess what? Even sunnier skies on Sunday for the big race, and it's just going to be beautiful out there. 85 degrees by Sunday is what we're calling for. It looks like a fabulous weekend for NASCAR. Going into your Saturday for the Zippo 200 at the Glen, looking like a great day. Start time for that, 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And then into Sunday for the big race, 1 o'clock start time for the Cheez-It 355 at the Glen. Looks like a great day. Like I mentioned, stationary front stays to our south and west, and sunshine and high pressure are going to dominate the Twin Tiers, and it's going to provide for a great end of the weekend. Race day forecast, 85 degrees, mostly sunny skies, high UV index, so make sure you do have some sunscreen if you're headed off to the race on Sunday. Your 7-day forecast looking like this. Mother Nature knows that NASCAR's in town. Sunny skies today, tomorrow, Sunday, sunny skies.
The National Weather Service in Binghamton, New York said while the weather is indeed sunny, making our job easier, we are here to provide weather support in case of any type of emergency that may occur. Examples include helicopter life flights, fires, hazardous material release, and law enforcement emergencies. For Weather or Not, I'm Ryan Belz.
We have a long-standing observation record here at Walker Building, but a gentleman on Long Island has set the U.S. record for his streak of observations. 101-year-old Richard Hendrickson is a volunteer weather observer for the National Weather Service, recording the temperature, precipitation, and wind twice a day, every day, for 84 years. Mr. Hendrickson began taking observations on July 1st, 1930, on the farm in Bridgehampton, New York, where he was born and raised, and still lives today. The National Weather Service says he has taken more than 150,000 individual readings, and says that Mr. Hendrickson is the first to serve for more than 8 decades. Even when the hurricane of 1938 devastated Long Island and knocked over his instrument shelter, he picked up the pieces, put the shelter back together, and kept on observing.
2 Penn State researchers have been commuting to work on skis this summer. The College of Earth and Mineral Sciences has sent 2 researchers up north to Alaska. Don Voigt and Kia Riverman, both from the Department of Geosciences, have been working in Juneau and on Alaska's ice field this summer. Their research is being conducted through the Penn State Ice and Climate Exploration Team, or PSICE for short. Voigt and Riverman have been using seismic equipment to map the sedimation conditions below the glacier. Their equipment essentially measures how the ice vibrates when energy is pushed into it. Using this information, they will be able to create maps of the glaciers and the water beneath them. Using these maps, we'll be able to understand more about the ecosystem and how it could be affected by a changing climate.
Parts of the Gulf of Mexico have become a death trap for some species of ocean life. According to NOAA, the Gulf of Mexico dead zone has significantly increased in size. Just a few square miles larger than Connecticut, this, quote, dead zone causes the displacement of fish, habitat loss, and negative effects on the abilities of species to reproduce, which alters the ecosystem. The dead zone is an area of the ocean that is low in oxygen, located off the coasts of Texas and Louisiana. Scientists say it is human-induced, caused by harmful toxins such as fertilizer and wastewater being washed down the Mississippi River into the Gulf. This leads to the expansion of algae blooms, which absorb the oxygen out of the water. Currently this summer, the dead zone measures 5,052 square miles, which is smaller than last year at 5,840. The largest ever recorded was 8,481 square miles. The goal of scientists is to shrink the dead zone down to 1,900 square miles by 2015. But so far, no progress has been made.
Atmospheric chemists have recently rediscovered a process that can help them understand the past and the future of the climate. During excavations near the South Pole in Antarctica, researchers found traces of various isotopes or forms of the element sulfur in the Arctic snow. Events such as volcanic eruptions, El Niño, and extreme fire seasons all left chemical traces in the layers of snow in the South Pole. Different changes in the atmosphere are indicated by the variety of anomalies or patterns of the sulfur in the snow layers. The amount of sulfur and the way it appears in the snow can help show past occurrences of events that affected the contents of the atmosphere.
While the tropics haven't been very active in the Atlantic basin, which may be welcome news to Pennsylvania and the rest of the East Coast, the Pacific is another story. Last week, Hurricane Iselle was churning in the waters of the eastern Pacific, making its way towards the Hawaiian Islands. But this hurricane had a special distinction. For a time, it was an annular hurricane. Annular hurricanes make up about 4% of all hurricanes and are characterized by a larger than average eye, symmetrical cold temperatures associated with the eye wall convection, and few rain band features. Weak easterly wind shear is thought to produce the symmetrical characteristics. Annular hurricanes are typically stronger and maintain their peak intensities longer than average hurricanes. The last annular hurricane in the eastern Pacific was Hurricane Kenneth in November 2011. Both Kenneth and Iselle reached Category 4 strength. Well, we mentioned earlier in the show the longest-serving National Weather Service observer, but now we want to take you back to our Weather Whiz quiz that talks about our observations here at the Penn State campus. The Weather Whiz quiz for this week was, when was the first weather observation taken here at the Penn State campus? Was it A, 1798, B, 1859, C, 1882, or D, 1901? And the correct answer is C, 1882.
Yeah, that's right, Christy. Weather observations have a long tradition here at the Penn State campus, and they actually started across the street in the Mineral Industries building.
That's right, and we haven't moved it very far now from Mineral Industries to Dyke and then to Walker. We've remained on the Penn State campus, but I guess we aren't quite as loyal as Mr. Hendrickson with his observations on his farm since 1930.
No, a variety of students take care of the weather observations today. We have a team of about 8 or 9 of us that are really working with those with Bill Surrett, who is managing those observations.
That's right. It wasn't until the 70s, though, that students got involved with taking the observations here on campus, but we're still closely watched.
Yeah, and some big names have been working on with those in the past. Dr. Charles Hosler was one of them who worked with weather observations through the 1950s and 60s.
Definitely a rich history of weather here at the Penn State campus. Well, that's all we have for this week's show. I've been your host, Christy Reuille.
And I'm Brad Guay. You have a great night.